When they do it, how will they do it? When Nintendo finally pulls back the curtain, what kind of reveal will they utilize? I think there are six major options for Nintendo to reveal their new console based on their previous track record and other industry approaches. In this video, we are going to look in turn at each, consider where and why Nintendo has used these strategies before, what the benefits and drawbacks are to each approach, and try to forecast their relative likelihoods. And actually, it's not necessarily either or. I suspect we may be in for a combination of several of these different strategies. So please like, subscribe, and let's get into it. And first up, let's give an overview of the different options that are on the table. Option 1, an October 2016 model. That would be a 3-minute trailer. This is an option which has served Nintendo very well in the past, and come what may, I expect there will be such a trailer. The Switch, Switch Lite, and Switch OLED all had a trailer at launch, although in the case of Switch Lite, it was integrated into a slightly larger presentation. I think, come what may, it is very likely that there will be such a trailer because it is by far the easiest way to quickly and concisely convey the information, and these can be shared on social media much more easily. Therefore, what we really need to consider is sequencing and packaging. Should a trailer drop come first? I think there's a good case to say that it should, or at least this is how Nintendo has often operated with announcements essentially out of nowhere in the past. Of course, the downside of having just a short trailer is simply that it is a short trailer, and Nintendo need to show not just the console's unique selling points, but also give a sense of the games that are going to be available. Third-party titles will drive attention, but the real eyeballs are going to go to the Nintendo exclusive games, and Nintendo has been oddly withholding on that front. With the original Switch, we had already seen Breath of the Wild and Mario Kart 8, and although Splatoon turned out to be a sequel, we already had an idea of what that game would be. Only Super Mario Odyssey really broke through as a new first-party title, and Switch OLED has loads of great games to showcase, including a few pre-announced titles like Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and Splatoon 3. I have talked in previous direct forecasts that I would expect them to start showcasing potential cross-gen games, so they have something to go into the trailers, but the only game that seems to fit this mold at the moment is Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. Sure, Pokemon Legends ZA could also be cross-platform, but we haven't seen footage yet, and that's before you consider all the third parties who want their time in the sun, which would make a smaller trailer difficult to digest. Overall, while I expect to see a trailer, the idea of a pure trailer drop shorn of context feels high risk to me, higher than in 2016 where the advance expectations were lower, or 2021 where they wanted to minimize disruption to the sales of the Switch and were able just to slot the OLED model in fairly surreptitiously. Switch 2 will, come what may, be a disruptive event, and I think it would need a little more explanation than a single trailer shorn of other context would allow. And so while it is a distinct possibility, let's look at some other options. Specifically, option 2, a January 2017 model, the Blowout. Here is a completely different approach. In January 2017, the Switch was already announced, so it wasn't a case of introducing the system for the first time, but rather fleshing out our understanding and giving a platform, literally, to third-party developers to tout their wares. Of course, in 2017, the third-party support was quite slim, but in 2025, we can expect a much more formidable lineup. It is unlikely, of course, that we would have a stage press event like in January 2017, but it's conceivable that we could have a full 50 or 60-minute direct focused on the new system if they really want to make it up to third parties who have sat on their hands while Nintendo remained inscrutable about their future plans. Between first-party and third-party titles, a major presentation should be easy to fill. The thing is, the first launch is going to easily get the most eyeballs of anything they do, so for third parties, this really would be gold dust. Being in the Nintendo Direct partner showcase that follows 3 weeks after launch is definitely not going to be considered on par with being part of the actual day one launch conversation. Of course, there is a downside, which is that if they do spend 60 minutes as opposed to 3 minutes, they're not going to get 20 times the coverage. The coverage will simply be more diluted. All those third parties will be relegated to footnotes, as will many of Nintendo's major title announcements. With a 3-minute trailer, you can show glimpses of a new Mario title or a Mario Kart, because that's just an exciting glimpse of something yet to come, and it will keep the momentum of speculation and excitement going. But if you spend an hour, serious info needs to be shared. You'd be taking several minute-long trailers for multiple major games, all of which will be running concurrently. Sure, regular Nintendo Directs have these, but most Directs only really have one or two, or very occasionally three big first-party announcements. Probably the biggest I can think of was February 2019, treating us to news of Super Mario Maker 2, Zelda Link's Awakening, and Astral Chain. But this is absolutely nothing compared to the density of titles, including AAA titles, we should be expecting from the launch of the Switch successor. Now, this could still work for Nintendo if it allows them to hold attention. If all eyes do indeed turn towards the Nintendo Direct for 50 whole minutes and it becomes a true event. This might elevate not just the Nintendo console, but the status of direct presentations in future, because people who wouldn't normally check out directs might come to experience and enjoy them, and it might therefore broaden Nintendo's reach for future presentations. Having said that, I don't think they need to launch a system with a direct to have a hype announcement, and so if this is the case, I think the major direct is far more likely to follow afterwards as opposed to being the initial launch. Option 3 then, the July 2019 model. That's the focused mini presentation or long advertisement. We've seen this approach most notably with the launch of the Switch Lite. It's not quite a short trailer, although it contained a 3-minute trailer within it, but it would involve someone, probably Yoshiaki Koizumi given his development track record, coming out to introduce us to a new console and then to generally hype it up a bit. We've also seen this in other ways recently, as in the case of the Super Nintendo World updates and the Nintendo Museum reveal. This kind of video could be anywhere from 6 to 15 minutes, but it wouldn't be a full-on direct. Frankly, out of all the options, this makes the most sense to me. Yoshiaki Koizumi and possibly Shinya Takahashi come out and introduce the console. They roll the trailer. They then chat a bit about the features, showing an infographic detailing the major third-party titles that will be there at or soon after launch, and make some arch comment about, did that look like a new Mario Kart game? And then close out with, we hope you will look forward to more information in the future. This has the great advantage, to Nintendo at least, that it passes out the reveal. It lets the key information about the system itself drop, and it allows for the few biggest game reveals to get their time in the sun. But it keeps their powder dry for later and maintains a sense of suspense around the console details. An end of January reveal video followed by a full-on February Direct is the option that would make the most sense to me. It also makes sense to me that they would want to pass out specific information at specific times. The Pokemon Presents and Mario Day presentations offer an ideal opportunity to deep dive games from those franchises. I think Nintendo, or certainly the current era Nintendo, likes to keep its cards as close to its chest for as long as possible. Yes, they want to convey that they have a dense lineup of titles, but a few teasers and the promise of further information in a couple of weeks should be more than sufficient to show good faith, while also prolonging the speculation train longer. Whether this would be called a direct or is just a slightly longer than usual YouTube video, I'm not quite sure what they do, but I think this offers them the opportunity to maintain maximum flexibility. Still, there's one more direct related option, which is option 4, the June 2012 model, a mid-direct announcement. Now, this was from the early days of Nintendo Direct, and in that case they opened right out with a flat-out reveal of the Nintendo 3DS XL. No messing around, Reggie just said hi and went right into introducing the new system. Now, I think this was a rather unique case. The 3DS had received a rather tepid launch, leading to a drastic price cut, and I think the XL was brought to market relatively quickly, in large part as an attempt to stabilize the console. But releasing a premium version of a console that was barely a year old always risked irritating users who had just bought the system, who in many cases were Nintendo's most loyal customers. So I get the feeling that this was a case of quickly shoving the news out of the door and then focusing on the exciting games afterwards. A direct announcement today might not be like this. I could even see them saving it for the final moments of a direct as a one more thing. But the problem with this option is logistical. Nintendo sets expectations in their direct announcements that they will not have Switch successor information, and if they confirm successor content, that will be the entire focus. Even if they don't mention it, people will still assume that it's coming just from the fact that they haven't explicitly denied it. And there is a risk that however exciting the Switch reveals are, at least for live responses, people could end up being negative about the Switch games they see just because they're impatient for the sequel system. It could be a masterstroke as a way to promote the Switch One's lineup by spending 40 minutes talking about Switch 1 and then only pivoting to the new system for the last 10. And if they have some really hype Switch 1 games, I still think Golden Sun is an underrated option, they could really give them a great platform. But ultimately, it feels a bit messy to me, and it's not been the habit of Nintendo for a very long time. But not as long a time as option 5, the March 2010 model, the Barebones press release. By far the most hilarious option, to my way of thinking, would be that they just get to the financial briefing and issue a to whom it may concern announcement, just like the launch of the 3DS. I mean, Furukawa never specified exactly the level of detail he would supply, so if they announced the title and some elements of its core concept, then strictly speaking, it would be revealed. Of course, the risk here is that this news will go out very quickly, and Nintendo will want their content and their images and their news and spin to fill the vacuum, not what everybody else is thinking and speculating about. However, that's not to say that this option is impossible. What if Furukawa decides to do a general introduction to the system? We intend to create a successor to the Nintendo Switch game console. We will call it Switch 2. Please look forward to more information soon. This kind of bare bones reiteration of what many widely expect fits the pattern of the previous investor meeting where they dropped the backward compatibility news but would still, if you squint a bit, count as a major reveal. Then they could say that more information would follow, and for all we know, that could be within the next couple of months, which of course would definitely be a major reveal. The problem with this is that it starts to feel like an endless tease, and there's only one reason I think that Nintendo would want to do this, and that's if they want to drop some bad news, but they don't want to eclipse their launch. Basically, you get the bad news out early, and then immediately carpet bomb it off the agenda with whizzy adverts and game news. But what bad news could they be sharing, and why would it be of significance to investors? I don't think they care if people are tepid on the console's power, especially since they seem to be planning to rely on DLSS to make games look better, so the headline power specs won't necessarily correlate to the experience of playing. Nor do I think they will be too concerned if they announce a date that's a long time away in the future, although I don't think the release of the console will be all that late. Given that they are apparently deep in production, I don't think we're looking at a September release date, so realistically any time they give would be within the broad range of expectations. However, I think they could get stung by criticism on price. If they want to put this out at, in US dollars, $449 or especially $499 or international equivalents, and for reasons that I've gone through in the past, I don't really see them going any lower than that. That's going to be a sting. In fact, there's a real risk that their carefully laid promotions and big, glossy Mario advertisements could be undercut by the headline news of the high price. Imagine if the trending topics alongside Switch 2 are $499. That would be people's very first impression of the console. However, if they do a bare bones announcement and fess up on the price up front, then the information is out there, but there's nothing more to give the story oxygen because that's really all they're saying. Then they can wait and introduce the console once people have accommodated to the reality of the price. All this said, it would still mean the investors getting just a fragment of the information, while more will be said in the days and weeks after, while investors have then months to wait for the chance to closely scrutinize Nintendo's decision. And I'm not sure that's something that they would want to do. Okay, one final option. Option 6, the event. By far the least likely, but still worth a mention, I guess, is the idea of launching in public. Nintendo did this in the days of E3 live on stage, but in these days, I think the most likely option will be something close to a Nintendo Live event of the style that they've been putting on most years. Of course, these are usually scheduled 5 or 6 months in advance. I'm sure if they said the word Switch 2, they'd fill a football stadium in fairly short order, but it would be an odd move at this point to have a physical launch, which by definition would have to be in a particular location for a global console launch. The advantage here is that they could get people together to actually play the games and experience anything new, but Nintendo would probably want to take fanatical control over what people posted to their social media after. Bear in mind how the Nintendo Switch Online test game, and it would only take one weird twist of fate, someone falls over or is sick on the guy in the Mario costume, and suddenly the story has taken on a completely different dimension quite outside of their control. I think some kind of event feature prior to launch, such as a presence at South by Southwest, has to be likely, and even if Nintendo can't rustle up their own full event, we saw particularly during the marketing of the Switch that Nintendo would run smaller events where people were able to encounter the Switch in the wild. This increasing number of Nintendo stores that we've seen also makes a good opportunity for people to encounter the new machine possibly early, although I suspect the security implications of having such tech in stores early would be likely too much to handle. The costs for security alone would be high, and in particular, Nintendo Live 2024 was cancelled due to threats being made against Nintendo staff and spectators. It's really sad, but any major event like this does contain the risk that one lunatic could ruin it for everyone. And yet again, Nintendo wants their launches hitch-free, and certainly free of anything that could cause harm to others or indeed their own staff. It's not that this is likely, but with the experience of 2024's Tokyo show fresh in their minds while they were making these plans, I can see them being very cautious about previewing the Switch 2 in too many locations. So look, all 6 options have some track record to recommend them, but I think there are some deductions we can make. First of all, given that this is a global launch, I really think Nintendo will want their first point of contact to be a video that is more or less exclusive to the Switch 2. That's been the way of these announcements for a long time, and I personally feel that it is very likely that we will be looking at some kind of exclusive statement, and also very likely that this will be in the form of a video, although with the caveat that we could get a statement preceding a video to cue up interest. So, if we're looking at a video, the question then is length. Now, Nintendo has a lot they could say. They've kept the lid on the kettle that is Switch 2 news for a long time, and I don't think it's unreasonably optimistic to think that there will be an absolute ton of game announcements to make, not least from third-party partners. The real question is how they pass this information out, and here I feel like a series of showcases may be more useful to them. Think about all they have to impart. They need to explain what the system is and its core concept. Well, we know that this information probably won't take too long. It's a better Switch. The specifics obviously need a bit more raking through, but they don't need more than a short trailer for that. Then they have to talk through the games, but doing so all at once is a risky strategy in some ways because each game will cannibalize the other's media airtime. Now, they'll definitely need to tease some games in the trailer in order to launch the thing. It seems very likely we'll get at least a glimpse of one new first-party title, and likely we will see more than 2. We got 3 on the Switch launch, plus the already announced Breath of the Wild. But with the Switch chaining together announcements for big reveals like the one in October 2016 and January 2017 was a sensible move because it amplified the press attention when Nintendo's fortunes were low. I don't think they will have the same issues with coverage this time. So let's say they introduce the console, let that settle, then do a big blast on the games, probably a full direct, maybe even a partner showcase, before they do bigger events such as on Pokemon Day and Mario Day, and then after that they start doing events such as South by Southwest and the showcase. Under these circumstances, things considered, I think a trailer of under 3 minutes is very possible, though on balance, unlikely. But what I think is likely is that the trailer will be less than 30 minutes, and I think there's even a chance it's under 20 minutes. Why do I come to that conclusion? Well, looking at the Nintendo Museum Direct and the Super Nintendo World Direct, they both came in at around 10 to 15 minutes. I think this is a format Nintendo likes. A good, serious deep dive into one topic, but still relatively condensed. And Switch Lite's debut was only just over 6 minutes. As much as Nintendo has been moving towards depersonalizing its releases with only Shinya Takahashi, Shigeru Miyamoto, and more occasionally, Eiji Aonuma, Yoshio Sakamoto, and Yoshiaki Koizumi regularly doing on-camera features, I think they may feel here that some kind of context for this is important, if only to set the expectation that the Switch one is not getting canned the second this thing drops out of the sky. I think some comment on the previous console on the Switch 1 is likely, if only to say that they've been grateful that so many people have enjoyed the Switch and that there will be many more games to come for the system, even though it's time to meet a new member of the family. Making people wait for full reveals of their new titles, even if it's only a couple of weeks, keeps that hype train going. Now, of course, some games are more market sensitive than others. ARMS, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and Fire Emblem Warriors were saved for reveal in January 2017, whereas Splatoon, Mario Kart 8, and 3D Mario were new announcements for the October 2016 trailer. And I suspect a lot of that is because these are the games that, ahead of the investors' meeting, are most likely to move the needle, as well as, of course, as being the games which are most exciting to the general public. If they're doing a Kid Icarus Uprising remake or a Pikmin spin-off, that's exciting for fans, but far less consequential than explaining that there will be, say, 3D Mario, Mario Kart, and Splatoon, plus perhaps a major game like Elden Ring coming to the system during its early life. I don't think it matters over much if they're showing launch titles. Nintendo has done early announcements before, and especially when they have a system to promote. In fact, we didn't know the launch title for the Nintendo Switch until the January. Splatoon 3 was trailed 18 months ahead of time as well, and Zelda Tears of the Kingdom had a full trailer nearly 2 years before it eventually released. However, both those games were used to promote the Switch OLED, and I don't think the early reveal of those titles was a coincidence. They wanted to have these titles to showcase the new OLED model. But some of these games then didn't get updates for many months or a full year, and Nintendo may be able to get away with similarly stringing people along by teasing a game and then only dropping more information quite a bit later. If they end up dropping a really robust lineup of smaller AA style games in a February Direct and then in June, and then they zone in on just one major AAA title at a time, I think they could easily ride this out. Let's say that Mario Kart is due in the spring quarter, and so that is the focus of a February Direct. 3D Mario is due in October, and so that is the major blowout focus in June. And Splatoon 4 is due in March, and so that is the focus of a September Direct. Under these circumstances, they could showcase Mario Kart in February, 3D Mario in June, Splatoon 4 in September, and still have plenty of time for other, smaller titles to be launched alongside. Of course, there is one thing that's worth considering about game reveals as well. Nintendo likes to surprise and delight. They know that people will buy a Mario Kart game, they will buy a 3D Mario game, they will buy a Splatoon title. In 2017, they were desperate to get all the information they could out about games to entice people to play. But in 2022, with Tears of the Kingdom, they actually kept back a huge amount of information. Everything about the depths, which was a vast portion of the landmass, and went a long way to answering early criticism about the recycled map, and which I'm sure the advertising departments at Nintendo would love to have talked about. All logic dictates that they should have revealed this from a sales perspective, and of course, we did see glimpses of the depths, but the fact is that Nintendo stuck to their guns and let people discover the game as it was meant to be discovered. And what was their reward for this? 20 million sales almost instantly. Look, I know Tears of the Kingdom has seemed to be relatively disappointing after the incredible success of Breath of the Wild, which continues to outpace even Tears of the Kingdom in sales even now, but I don't think you can put this down to the lack of an initially strong response. People are going to respond to these major games because most of the people owning systems are going to be in it for the big Mario titles. The initial response was incredible to Tears of the Kingdom, and yet they actually didn't reveal a lot, or at least they revealed far less than they could have. And they've done this before. Kit and Krista have shared their frustration at not being able to convey to people that in Super Mario 3D World, completing the game was only about half the content because the post game was so massive. There will come a time for hugely advertising and spoiling everything in order to push these games to lots of new people, but that time will come later in the system's life. These are evergreen titles after all, and they don't need to be quite so explicit about all the content in the early days of their existence because people are already going to pick them up, and having people surprised and delighted is what Nintendo is ultimately looking to say it's achieved. If Mario Kart has half the courses unlockable, would they want to spoil the inevitable Advance Wars track? And particularly for the new Super Mario game, look, Mario is bigger than ever. This is the first post-movie 3D Mario to release. It's going to be absolutely huge, and I really think that when it launches, they will want to have some surprise and wonder. They will want that social media moment of people being astonished together. Now, none of this means they won't advertise the games, I'm sure they will, but how much do they focus on them right out of the gate? How much focus do these games really need? If they can hold off on revealing content early, then they have that much more leeway later on to show new things. But once something's revealed, the moment is forever gone. All of which makes me think that while we will learn about some of the new titles, and it will of course be exciting, there will be far more we don't know than that we do after the initial Switch 2 reveal. Of course, Nintendo has got itself into trouble with this before, after E3 2018, where Super Smash Bros. Fans ate like kings, but fans of almost anything else from Nintendo came away feeling sorely underappreciated. Their stock dropped, with a sense that Nintendo didn't have a sufficiently deep bench of games. In their September Direct afterwards, they revealed Luigi's Mansion 3 and Animal Crossing New Horizon, while in February they followed up with Mario Maker 2 and Zelda Link's Awakening. Was September 2018 a case of Nintendo reacting to the disappointment? Probably not, since Isabelle in Smash was such an obvious time to drop news of Animal Crossing, while September was, I guess, close enough to October to be a good opportunity to drop a tease of Luigi's Mansion 3. Having said that, the first Luigi's Mansion 3 trailer didn't look as good as the later ones, and while that is to be expected, with a year's extra development to go, it's also plausible that this was going to be a February reveal, with Link's Awakening to reveal not in February but the following June, a bit like the way that Echoes of Wisdom was revealed with just a few months to go. Now, irrespective of whether Nintendo did make any course corrections behind the scenes, it shows that you can try people's patience a little bit too much. But for now, I think that fear is a long way off coming true. 2018's problem was ultimately a dearth of original games, and certainly of games of major stature, while in 2025 there is every expectation that Nintendo has lined up a very solid bench of titles. If they don't reveal everything, it will probably be read by many as a sign of strength, not weakness, as long as they do ultimately follow it up with good content when the game's lineup is revealed. So look, the field is very open and you can make your own judgments. If I had to guess, and this is a guess not a forecast since any one individual option is obviously far less likely than every other possibility stitched together, I would say about 7 or 8 minutes, followed by a direct, followed by separate deep dives into Pokemon and Mario, and then probably another direct just after launch. But what do you think is the likeliest option, and have I missed any? Please do check out the Patreon for lots of exclusives. Thank you to everybody who likes, comments, shares, and subscribes, and I shall see you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.